Hello, everyone. I'm your Zoom host, and I'm joined here by our moderator, Oliver, and our session speaker, Jesse. Can you all confirm that you can hear me clearly?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. So I pass the floor over to you, Oliver.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. I welcome you to this session. My name is Oliver Wasonga. I work at the University of Nairobi Range Management Section. I will be moderating this session, which is a parallel session under the theme 2 on management of natural resource-based conflicts. In this session, we shall delve further on this topic, specifically on how we can reduce resource-based conflicts through development of coping strategies, as well as livelihood diversification. We probably know by now that most of the conflicts in the Horn of Africa and Sahel are as a result of competition over scarce resources, and especially in the dryland, so where communities have to move to access resources within and across their territories. And therefore, besides just simply putting in place sustainable natural resource sharing mechanisms, it is important to also expand livelihood portfolios among communities as a way of reducing conflicts. Now, to elaborate on this, our topic for this session is basically lessons for sustainable natural resource management, and we'll be basically focusing on conflict reduction through development of coping strategies and diversified livelihoods. We shall be listening to lessons, some practical experience from Kenya, and our speaker this evening is Dr. Jesse Owino. Dr. Owino holds a PhD in climate change adaptation and is a natural resources management expert. He has a wealth of experience working with local communities and with respect to learning from them, as well as training them on practical ways of improving livelihoods. He has over 18 years experience working with communities with diverse, cultural, religious, economic, and social backgrounds. This particular session will take slightly over 40 minutes, and I kindly invite you all to use the chat option, and please kindly observe the protocols. And at the bottom of your window, you'll see the chat option, which you can use to post your questions. And at the end of it, we shall be able to have participants asking questions, and Jesse will be able to respond to them. But I will also encourage you to use the chat so that we can select some of the questions that you raise at the end of this session. So now I invite Dr. Owino to take it away. Jesse, you're welcome.
Hello, my name is Jesse Owino. I'm going to present on conflict reduction through the development of coping strategies and diversified livelihoods during the IGAD CILSSS and FAO Horn of Africa and Sahel Virtual Knowledge Share Fair. So I work for Kenya Forestry Research Institute, and I work in the Rift Valley Ecoregion Research Program, which is based in the whole from Narok County in Kenya at the base to Turkana County at the north of Kenya. Majorly what I'm going to present to is in the border areas of Turkana County shown on the screen, which is, when you look, it borders 3 countries. There's Uganda, to the west there's South Sudan, and then there's Ethiopia. And the project that we've been doing in terms of conflict is that cross-border conflicts in these areas, especially in the Ugandan area, are majorly due to resources. And you can see the reason is because Kenya is majority arid and semi-arid, and that the border areas, especially now the ones in west, Turkana areas, the one in west, are actually classified as arid and with a few pockets of semi-arid. So it is definitely resource scarce in these areas. So you find that the areas, the context in these regions, you've got mixed bushlands, you've got acacia woodlands, you've got scattered savanna, you've got shrublands, and then you've also majorly you have what you call a bushed shrubland in this area. So if you see in all the photos, the ground is basically bare, and the socioeconomic activity for the communities is majorly pastoralism. So pastoralism in a place whereby the region is forage scarce is our main focus in these issues. And you realize that deforestation and land degradation in the drylands is majorly caused through two forces, either anthropogenic, that is human caused, or then natural. And all this lead usually to scarcity in terms of water, siltation in terms of water infrastructure, and degraded landscapes, as you can see in these areas in this photo. And then the methodological approach to this presentation is that we utilized existing resources in these areas, which we have what we call riverine forest resources. We've got pastures, which are there through either enclosures or for new species or old. There is sustainable use of the rangeland resources, such as the Loima forest, then restoration of indigenous species. This is the systemic methodological approach for this work. And majorly in the cross-border areas, what we did was we did planting of natural species, and then in terms of agroforestry, and then training communities on what we call non-timber forest products like gum and resins, aloe trucanensis production, and then you've seen pasture production, and then agroforestry through irrigation, but then in between we introduced species such as moringa to help the soil and also help the communities get revenue from them. And in subsequent, we get impacts in the short term. You end up in each of our sites, in such as in Nakoyo, which we had reforestation, in Nadapal, where we've done apiary, and then prosopis management, because that's an invasive species. We end up having discussions with communities, and then you can see restored grasslands in places which were very bare. And in the long term, you have a scenario whereby trees that had previously disappeared have established, and fodder herbs have regenerated in these areas that we do. Thus, our model is to create what we call livelihood support through forest resources. And you can see even for prosopis management, through managing of the prosopis, we've been able to restore degraded acacia woodlands and fodder areas that were previously not existing. So we've moved from a very bare space through occupied by prosopis, through thinning and management, you get the same acacia wooded lot, which you get fodder in the same space. So these are results of studies that we've done in these areas, such as riverine forests have been known to change from Acacia totilis to Prosopis dominans. And this has caused a lot of ecological consequences because we lose species that are critical for our pastoral resources. And also, the indigenous species regenerate in reclaiming the areas on other plants that can be planted. So you find through managing of the Prosopis, we've been able to get back our indigenous species, our indigenous acacias. You can see our indigenous aloes have come in these areas. And below is now a proper community integrating using aloe and acacias, so they're able to utilize the bare lands for livelihood improvement. So opportunities means in terms of Prosopis in management, we focus on thinning through, that means management through utilization. So you reduce the density of Prosopis, and you've realized 6 meters distance is the optimum required for thinning of Prosopis. So this is what we train the communities in these areas. We also do management, training them on metal kilns and carbonization. This is burning charcoal using improved medium, so that you get up to around 26 to 32% recovery from every 100 kilograms of wood, which is a marked improvement from the traditional method, whereby when you burn with traditional method, you get between 0 to 9%. Then we have livestock feeds from Prosopis, which have been produced in other areas for dry season feeding. And we have other opportunities in terms of charcoal, such that in 2004, income at Marigat was estimated at that. And you can see this is just due to sale of Prosopis charcoal. And this is compared to Tana River, and which was basically known to have the most of Prosopis, and cross-border areas of Baringo, because Marigat is what borders Turkana and West Pokot areas. So you find there's improved, even industry has come in to do cogeneration of electricity from the same Prosopis. So in conclusion, our key lessons that we've needed partners to upscale these interventions, because we've been doing them from a demonstration perspective, whereby now we are hoping state and non-state actors can be able to upscale these initiatives, majorly in the cross-border areas, so that we create resources in these areas that are resource scarce. We also need to focus communities on non-timber forest products, so that we can be able to have sustainable impacts on livelihoods, because we realize these non-timber forest products are well known by the communities. So all we needed to do was enhance the marketing, enhance the collection, bring the market to the community, and the communities are able to take through over with these activities. We also appreciate the need to share success stories as well as challenges such as this, because some of our biggest challenges is in terms of we've wished to expand on these interventions, but then funding is always limited, and also partners being aware of these things has also been limited, hence limiting some of our scope. We'd want the replication to be done on both sides, between Kenya and Uganda, Kenya and South Sudan, Kenya and Ethiopia, in the IGAD areas. And we also need to explore these new areas, as there's still a lot to be done, because just showing this regeneration is what we call a quick win. This is what you get in 3 months. To get a tree, you need more than that. And I want to say that once we have a breakthrough, we use our collaborative capacity as resource people for sustainability. I want to thank you for this presentation.
Thank you very much, Jesse, for that excellent presentation, giving us experience you've had with the project in Turkana. And basically this revolves around sustainable land management, restoration of rangelands, and trying to take the opportunity of the invasive species to enhance income among the pastoral communities. We'll be able to take comments, questions from the participants, but I think before we get to that, I'll have the first go, and probably just to get to understand more, I would ask probably you to clarify, and based on your experience, what aspects of the interventions would you say have significantly contributed to the reduction of resource-based conflicts with respect to Turkana County? Jesse.
Thank you, the moderator, Oliver. I've just, there are 2 questions. One from your go, and then there's one on the chat. So I'll try and answer both within this brief.
Okay.
In terms of reduction of conflict, we have seen from our experience that because of the pastoral nature of our communities on the Turkana-Ugandan border, the most successful intervention has always been the pasture regeneration initiatives, closely followed by non-timber forest products, especially through gums and resins. Because the pasture, we are using a model which is, you create enclosures whereby communities share this in terms of villages, and mostly we work with the sedentarized communities who always feel like they have been left with very little resources within their areas. So within our intervention structure, by setting up the enclosures, we've realized that the communities have been able to do what we call cut and carry, and actually reduce the pressures now to move into the border regions, especially for pasture. And for non-timber forest products, this has given livelihood options to the pastoral area is also highly illiterate in terms of formal education. And this means access to formal employment opportunities, even from state organizations, NGOs, non-governmentals, is also very difficult because they require some level of formal training. And with the non-timber forest products, we've realized that communities have been able to engage in meaningful livelihood interventions, thereby reducing their pressure on relying only on pastoralism as a livelihood option. And thus, the diversified livelihood has also reduced the pressure in terms of conflict, but we have noticed that it has increased trade in the cross-border areas. Then the question on the chart in terms of sustainability of the charcoal income, especially from Prosopis. We have done surveys in the ASAL areas of Turkana, and by our estimates, we were talking about 3,000 square kilometers of Prosopis in Turkana only. That is a huge invasive belt that the way the communities are managing through utilization without heavy mechanization, it allows them to sustainably acquire livelihood options in terms of income. But the Prosopis, because of the nature of their management and now with the trainings that we're doing on thinning, it means we are converting the Prosopis, instead of just being an invasive belt, we are now creating what we call woodlands of Prosopis, which is more beneficial to the rangeland than the invasive belt, which was now a monostand, a monocrop of just Prosopis. So this has now enabled, it is now better for the environment, the way communities are handling it, but also the resource is so abundant and its regeneration is so fast that the communities, just with their initiatives, we are still below the 5% even intervention level that we desire. Thank you, Oliver.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jesse, for responding to that. I think if you allow me, before we get to the next question, maybe just something more on,
yes.
on that to do with the sustainability, because I believe communities are getting mixed, responses in terms of people going there telling them, look here, we need to eradicate Prosopis, and some groups coming in and saying, look here, this is a resource and you can use it to benefit yourselves. So how do you manage this? Because that one, I know it's going on in these areas.
Yes, Oliver, I appreciate that question. And therein, I always say, having the benefit of working in the northern counties which have Prosopis as an issue, I've realized that the Turkana case is so unique as a case study, because this is the only county that I know of whereby the county administration, because of seeing the livelihood intervention options that Prosopis has offered their communities, wants to even have what you call a Prosopis management plan for the whole county. And if you look at the Kakuma refugee camp, which is close to around 700,000 households in the camp, the main timber, we call it the wood fuel species that is in utilization in the camp, it's only Prosopis. And that is the only one that has been able to sustainably provide wood fuel energy in these areas. So the question is, where are the trade-offs? The message for invasive species has always been eradicate. But then when you have a woody invasive species the way Prosopis is, serious countries that have put in a lot of money, case study South Africa and Sudan, yes, they've put in interventions to try and control Prosopis, even using mechanization and even aphid control using insect species. And this has been extremely costly and has also failed. So we realized that the only option around this, because we're not willing to throw in a lot of finances to just eradicate something that scientifically it is doing an ecologically great job, because Prosopis was put into those places to cover bare ground, and truly it did cover bare ground, only that it moved into undesirable areas. So the challenge has always been to keep the messaging consistent in these areas, that management through utilization allows you to control the invasive species, and it can become something better for your use even in these areas. So the question is just in the messaging that we need to now mobilize all the partners so that we have consistent and common messaging for this issue.
Thank you, Jesse. I would like to encourage participants to post more questions on our chat section down there so that we can be able to sample them, and Jesse will be able to respond to them. Now, as we wait for that, Jesse, one more question that I would want to put across to you is how have you involved the decision makers and the implementers in your project? Which role have they taken in this project? Thank you.
Thanks, Oliver. There's a very interesting story again to the involvement of the stakeholders. You understand this country, Kenya, got a new constitution in 2010. So we had started a lot of these interventions before the 2010 constitution. That means the engagement was at national government level with partners at national government. Then when the constitution happened and then counties were established in 2013, we've had to design models that are engaging in both national government levels and as well as county government levels. Because of the level of engagement and also implementation of county governments, it was very necessary to target these new programs within the county government integrated CIDP development plan. And we realized that the messaging had to be very critical, that you have to be able to train the administrators as well as train the implementers at the same time with the same content, so they're able to speak in the same forum in the different levels whereby county governments engage. And this has been enabled by bringing in both the legislative arm of the county governments as well as now the executive arms, and having programs that the demos that truly work at community level, at exactly household level, that has created the buy-in also from the county government systems. And this, for me, is where now the partners need to either borrow from us also and also upscale with us in this same area. Because you realize governments and essentially county governments, if, let's say for Turkana, the area is extensive. 77,000 square kilometers of Turkana County is so extensive. So the challenge has always been how to be able to concentrate a lot of these interventions in the scattered nature of where the pastoralists live, especially in the large cross-border area that we have between Turkana and Uganda, and also Turkana and South Sudan. And this means we need partners to create clusters of success stories along the border regions so that we can be able to now truly get ahead of the minimizing conflict in this area.
Yeah, thanks, Jesse, so much for that. I can see a question from Alex. Alex is asking a very, very important question here, that knowing that we have a problem of water scarcity in the drylands, how do you ensure survival of trees in these areas?
Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Oliver, for this. This is what, when you do research, you realize how the problem of the invasive species, let's say Prosopis, came to be. This was the era whereby development and research was top down. We come into a community and introduce a species without understanding its ecology and its adaptation to these new areas. But now the current practice is we always start with, let's say for the trees, with what is in the community and what the communities know and what the communities use. After that screening, we select species based on our trials on these species in a controlled environment. And we're able to know the species that survive very harsh environments. So you'll realize most of the species we use are species suited and also developed from just screening species that have been established, and they have established themselves long in this area of the cross-border areas of Turkana and also Uganda. And also the second component, we also supplement some of these, the species that we've screened with what we call structural absorbent polymers, whereby whenever we plant, these are materials that retain moisture in the soil during, let's say, a freak rain, a flash flood, or any watering that the community would have done. And it retains the moisture far longer than what would have been lost naturally had it not been applied, to increase the survival of these trees, especially in their younger stages. So once the trees reach a height of 2 meters, most of the dryland species would actually survive very well. Survival is above 84% once the tree reaches 2 meters. So that is how we ensure the survival of the trees in these areas.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jesse, for responding clearly on that. I can see a lot of comments now coming in, but before I start sampling again, one thing that I may just want to follow up on is on involvement of the communities. You know very well that communities, pastoral communities rely very much on customary institutions to be able to share resources across their territories. Turkana is a cross-border area where resources are shared across the border. When you initiate such kind of a project in a community like this, and at times of difficulties during drought, other communities may also want to come and share in. Have you come up with a mechanism on ensuring that these resources are then harmoniously shared by different communities?
Thanks, Oliver. One of the key observations we have found in these areas, like the Turkana and the Karamojas, they are all in the Ateker clan, so they're closely related. So their governance systems have things like Nyirias, which are small areas of dominations for various clans, and epakas, areas of also dominations of now selected family groupings in these areas. So when you're doing issues to do with peace and conflict, one of our biggest strengths has been in our partnership capability. Peace, these areas have also seen violent conflict over time. We have that on record. So there's always been some peace activities ongoing in terms of discussions. So as guys, we proposed a model whereby we engage within the same peace structures, and now we add in the infrastructure, natural resource related conflict, resource related programs. And this has now added to the peace discussions, whereby we are able to find out which seasons conflict usually escalates, and in that prediction system, in terms almost like an early warning system, we design, so if you're doing a grass program, a pasture program is done so that the pasture should be ready on both sides when that was the season where conflict was most because of pasture. So such occurrences has caused reduction in conflict because of the availing of the resource when it is most required.
Thank you, Jesse. I think we can now sample some of the questions which are streaming in. And one is asking, Manal Hamid is asking, how can we convince the institutions to buy in? I think he meant the government to buy in into the idea of using prosopis to produce charcoal instead of eradicating it. Maybe you have something to say about it. How have you been able to change people's or the decision makers' way of thinking about this, that instead of eradicating it, we need to actually make use of it as a source of income for the community?
Thanks, Oliver. For Manal's question, one of our key practices has always been we have to show how that change feeds into another program. So we have been able to put forth a case on how availability of wood energy is one of the key issues for malnutrition in these ASAL areas, because you realize when people use bad species, let's say Salvadora Pasica, which is also abundant in a lot of ASAL areas, this tree is very light, cannot cook a meal very well. So communities cook a much smaller quantity, and you can't get it in abundance to be able to cook for many times in a day, and also to cook for your food in a proper way. So we've shown that even using species like prosopis to get charcoal, a little of it can cook a long way, can convert food better, and has actually, in areas whereby the charcoal was in play, including even the Fiji camp, we've seen a marked change in malnutrition just due to the availability of wood fuel energy. So that type of messaging is what needs to get out. So the biggest challenge has always been the messaging. From us, from research, we always get answers, but there's a very slow approach And this is why we appreciate this knowledge fair and such forum, because we are able to now engage with executives, with implementers of different kinds on these kind of components, and they're able to now upscale some of these interventions. That is always the missing link, the upscale and the messaging of the success practice to the policymakers.
Thank you, Jesse. We have some more questions coming in. I can see one from John Gadongo, who is just wondering how you actually manage to change mentality of these communities, knowing very well that they are a predominantly pastoral community who rely on livestock as their main source of livelihood. And now here you are telling them that, look here, you can do other, you can engage in other economic activities other than just, rearing livestock.
Thanks, Oliver. And for John, one of the most interesting challenges even in training is you always have to remember when you're doing such activities in such areas, our job is not to change the pastoralist to be a farmer. Our job is not to change the farmer to be a pastoralist. Our job has always been to make sure that whatever decision they make is sustainable in the long run. So we have always discovered when you engage different aspects of discipline, so we have our sociologists, our anthropologists telling us on what people do and how they live their lives, we have been able to design programs that fit within the same community structures. So that in case of, instead of me pushing forth, let's say a horticulture related program, I would push a pasture and an non-timber forest program. Especially the non-timber would be something like beekeeping and alloy, which communities in these areas already know, but just that they have not been doing it at in an organized forum. And now this is how we make a market out of these engagements. And with that, we always hope that when people see, because we've always trusted that when a pastoralist sees something working, it's very easy buy-in than when you just teach him and train him theoretically. So our buy-in has always been to create successful physical models that other people can see, and then we use the same success stories from our pastoralists to tell the stories to other pastoralists in other areas to make the matter, to do our upscale component. And we have seen a lot of success using this method. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Jesse. I'm looking for more questions on from the participants. I think it's been a long day. It's been a long day, and people are just slowing down, and that's all right. But there's one from Hamed Abdi is talking about series of intercommunal conflicts that have faced Somalia, and is just wondering what strategies and solutions would you propose to minimize continuity of conflict over resources. I'm sure there's no one solution that really would suit all. Yeah, suit all the situation, but I think they also have a problem with prosopis, and I think some of these strategies you're talking about could also, from lessons learned in Kenya, Ethiopia, could also be applied in their country. Yeah. So
thanks, Oliver.
I don't. Yeah. Go on.
Can
please.
I just make some comments around this for Ahmed? I support you, Oliver, in the same thing that there's actually no silver bullet in conflicts and NRM. But I always say the take home is always one. It is an adaptive natural resource management strategy. One, we have to be able to know the conflicts, like study the conflicts, study the trends, study the escalation, study the locations, and then try and create common understanding of what is occurring here that causes a conflict. Why is it that people have to come here at this time? Where else can they go? Do they know that these other areas? Because we've realized, like through, let's say, community resource mapping, we've realized communities have also had a limited knowledge of where resources were. And this was based because of their previous routes, especially for pastoral migratory routes. So you'd realize that just with some addition of spatial planning and mapping and training on communities on this, they're able to discover that instead of, let's say, moving in a particular direction, they can actually divide their herds into three and move in three different directions and still get the same resources within reasonable areas without putting so much pressure on the land. So it's always a learning experience. So you learn from the conflicts and you design the programs with the communities on the products and the uses that the communities can relate with very well.
Yeah,
Thanks,
thank you very much, Jesse. I don't see questions streaming in anymore, and I think we have like 7 or so minutes left. And oh well, there's one from Ahmed. Ahmed, I think, is asking something. Can we say that colonial legacy created many conflicts amongst East African communities in rural areas, especially in the border areas? If yes, what are the best strategies that we can use, except the economic perspective you mentioned before, but also there's also other causes that create these conflicts. I think the answer or the response that you have given that I've also did allude to, I think basically responds to this particular question, because it's basically about the general conflict management. I don't see any specific questions coming from the audience at this point. Yeah, but I just want to state, because we still have some time left, that conflicts, or would I put it this way, that security and peace are intricately linked to the environmental and livelihood securities, or resilience for that matter, and especially in these arid and semi-arid areas, where communities really rely on mobility, they rely on reciprocal sharing of resources, and they also rely on social alliances to access grazing and water resources. And so management of these resources in a way that is acceptable to the community, and that allows harmonious coexistence of communities is very, very important with respect to ensuring that there's peace. But we also know that conflicts is also caused by other factors other than resources. But when you look at it deeply, then you realize that in one way or the other, they are also remotely linked to attempts by various communities to take control of resources that they deem are quite key for livelihood, their livelihood security. I think a few points, messages that I probably want to take home before we bring this to a closure. A few points that I really want to take home are: one thing that I've been able to pick out from this Jesus presentation is that it's very important to mix both the short-term and long-term benefits. Yeah, because sometimes the communities have to wait for so long and they don't see the reason why they should engage in an otherwise a very important project. And probably also pick this one, that prosopis for peace, and that it is just the right tree, probably growing on in the wrong place. Another important message is the involvement or recognition of the customary institutions when it comes to management of resources and ensuring peace in amongst these communities. And before I give Jesse the chance to probably give his last, or closing remarks on this, I would thank the participants for engaging. It's been a long day, and I thank you very much for making time for this, and remaining in there, staying in there throughout this session. And at this point, I would like to ask Jesse if he has some closing remarks before we bring this to an end.
Thanks, Oliver.
Jesse?
Yeah, first I'd just like to appreciate the organization FAO, IGAD, CILLS for this forum, because this knowledge shares are one of the best ways, at least, to share information across partners across countries. And we always just have to remember that borders are just invisible lines on the land. Whenever you go to pastoral areas, it is just one area, one next village. No one ever usually thinks in terms of a country, no one thinks in terms of a district, those kind of spaces. So we just need to be able to at least always remember that we have to work together as partners. We have to work with many other partners, especially we have to think of partners even in sectors that do not necessarily relate to NRM. You have to talk to, let's say, if it's religion that is binding people, you have to talk to religious leaders. You have to be able to engage even in civil society, because you'd realize that to get the messaging across, you'd need all the channels to be able to understand your message, especially on these NRM related conflicts. Thank you for this episode.
Thanks a lot, Jesse. I think now I'm bringing this to an end, and I would like to ask participants, because we have 1 or so 2 minutes left. I would encourage you to please put in more questions. You can post more questions on the chat option there, and we can collect them at the end of this. And once again, I thank everyone for making time for this, and be blessed.